Bantam Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents Star Wars, Hammertong, The Tale of the Tonnika Sisters, by Timothy Zahn. It's a dilemma, really. That's what it is, Dr. Kellering said in that precise Imperial Prime University voice of his that went so well with his young, upper-class, pampered face, and so poorly with the decidedly low-class tap cafe he and the two women were sitting in. On the one hand, there's the whole question of security, especially with all the rebel activity in this sector, and I can assure you that Dr. Eloy and I aren't the only persons within the project who are concerned about it. His forehead wrinkled in upper-class pampered perplexity. But on the other hand, Captain Drome is extremely hot-tempered in regard to what he considers his personal territory. He'd be terribly angry if he knew I was even talking about this matter outside the compound, especially with people like, well, like you. Seated across the table from Kellering, Shada Ducal took a sip from her cup, the wine carrying with it a hint of remembered bitterness, and shame with it. Like most girls growing up on their war-devastated world, the Mistryl Shadow Guards had been the focus of all her hopes. They had been the last heroes of her people, the enigmatic cult of warrior women still fighting to force justice for her world from uncaring, even hostile officials of the Empire. She had begun her training as soon as they would take her, studying and working and sweating her way against the odds until, at last, she had been deemed worthy to be called a Mistryl. Assigned to a team, she had headed out on her first mission, only to learn that the Mistryl were no longer the valiant warriors of legend. They were mercenaries, nothing more than mercenaries, hiring out to useless, insipid people like Kellering. She sipped at her wine again, listening with half an ear as Kellering prattled on, letting the memories fade. Now, a year and 7 missions later, the shame had faded to a dull ache in the back of her mind. Someday she hoped it would be gone altogether. Beside Shada, Team Prime Manda Dulin lifted a hand, finally putting an end to Kellering's ramblings. "We understand your problem, Dr. Kellering. May I suggest that you've already made your decision? Otherwise the three of us wouldn't be sitting here." "Yes, of course," Kellering sighed. "I suppose I'm still... Oh, but that's foolish. The Mistryl may be somewhat, but... still, you certainly come highly recommended. When my cousin was telling me about you, he said that you had..." "The mission, Doctor," Manda interrupted again. "Tell us about the mission." "Yes, of course." Kellering took a deep breath, his eyes darting around the crowded tap cafe as if wondering which of the humans or aliens at the other tables out there might be Imperial spies. Or maybe he was just wondering what he was doing outside his pampered little academic world, consorting with mercenaries. "I'm connected to a research project called Hammertong." His voice was so low now that Shada could barely hear it over the background noise. "My superior, Dr. Eloy, is senior scientist of the group. A couple of weeks ago, the Emperor's representative of the project informed us that we were all going to be moved to some new location. We're to leave in 3 days. "And you don't think Captain Drome is handling security properly?" Manda asked. Kellering shrugged uncomfortably. "Dr. Eloy doesn't. The two of them have had several arguments about it." "So what exactly do you want from us?" "I suppose... well, I really don't know." Kellering threw hooded looks back and forth between the two women. "I suppose I thought we could talk to Captain Drome about you bringing in some people to help guard us en route..." He trailed off, apparently finally noticing the expression on Manda's face. "Let me explain something about the Mistryl, Dr. Kellering." Her voice was still polite, but with an edge of chromed mullinine to it. "Your cousin probably told you we were just your standard group of fringe mercenaries. We're not. He probably told you we sell our services to the highest bidder, no questions or ethics involved. We don't. The Mistral are the warriors of a forgotten cause, and if we hire ourselves out as temporary security to people like you, it's because our world and our people require money to survive. We will not work with Imperial forces. Ever. Strong words, but that was all they were. There was a great deal of simmering hatred toward the Empire among the Mistral. Anger for their suspected complicity during the war, and for their complete indifference since then. But with the remnant of their people living on the edge of survival, the simple, cold truth was that the Mistral couldn't afford to turn down anything but the most odious of offers from the most odious of people. Manda could sound as high-minded as she wanted to, but in the end, she and the team would accept Kellering's job. And, as she had 7 times before, Shada would do her best to help them fulfill the contract, because the other simple, cold truth was that she had nowhere else to go. But of course Kellering didn't know that, and from the look on his face, Manda might have just dropped a large building on him. "Oh no," he breathed. "Please, we need you. Look, we're not really with the Empire, we're funded by them, but we're actually a completely independent research group." "I see." Manda frowned thoughtfully, making a show of the decision-making process, probably in hopes of stifling any protest on Kellering's part when she finally named her price. With an Imperial-funded project, that price was likely to be high. It was. "All right," Manda said at last. "We can bypass your Captain Drome entirely and run you a forward screen net that should flash out the sort of ambushes the Rebel Alliance likes to stage these days. You said 3 days till departure? That'll give us time to bring a few other teams in. We should be able to field a minimum of 10 ships in the screen, plus a 2-ship aft guard in case the rebels try something cute." She lifted her eyebrows slightly. "The fee will be 30,000. Kellering's eyes bulged. 30,000? "You got it," Manda said. "Take it or don't." Shada watched Kellering's face as it went through the run of shock, nervousness, and discomfiture. But, as Manda had already pointed out, if he hadn't already made his decision, they wouldn't be here. "All right," he sighed. "All right. Dr. Eloy can cut you a credit when we meet with him this afternoon." Manda shot Shada a quick glance. "You want us to meet with Dr. Eloy?" "Oh, of course." Kellering seemed surprised by the question. "He's the one most worried about security." "Yes, but where would we meet him? Here?" "No, at the compound. He almost never leaves there. Don't worry, I can get you in." "Well, what about Drome? You said yourself he was pretty touchy on the subject of outsiders." "Captain Drome isn't in charge of the project. Dr. Eloy is." "Such details seldom bother Imperial military officers. If he catches us there..." "He won't. He won't even know you're there. Besides, you need to see how the Hammertong's been loaded aboard the ship if you're going to know how to properly protect it." Manda didn't look happy, but she nodded, nevertheless. "All right." Her hand curled into a subtle signal. "I have a couple of matters to attend to here first, but after that I'll be happy to come with you. Shada can go off-planet in my place and get the rest of the team assembled." "Understood." Shada nodded. The team didn't need any assembling, of course. All 6 of them were right here in this Tap Cafe, with their 2 disguised fighters, the Skyclaw and Mirage, parked in separate docking bays across town. But it was as good an excuse as any for Shada to disappear from sight. Backups, after all, weren't supposed to be seen. "Good," Manda said briskly. "Have the others here in Gorno by nightfall. In the meantime," she gestured Kellering toward the door, "we'll go deal with a couple of details, and then go meet your Dr. Eloy." "They're approaching the gate." Pav Darman's voice came from one of the 2 comlinks fastened to Shada's collar. 2 guards visible, but I see movement in the gatehouse behind the fence. Could be as many as 6 or 7 more in there." "Copy," Shada acknowledged, stroking a finger restlessly across the side of her sniper's blaster rifle, and wishing Pav wouldn't get so chatty on the air. Mistral comlinks were heavily encrypted, but that wouldn't stop the Imperials from pinpointing the transmissions if they took it into their heads to do so. And this close to a major base, that was a distinct possibility. The base. Lifting her eyes from the section of road winding through the hills below, the road Manda and Kellering would be traversing in a few minutes if they made it through the gate, Shada studied the waves of rolling hills that stretched into the distance beyond the innocuous security fence cutting across her view. It certainly looked like the agricultural test ground the signs on the fence claimed it to be. Not at all like the weapons-bristling popular image of an Imperial military research base. But its strategic location, within 50 kilometers of the Gorno spaceport and 4 major technical supply and transport centers, made its true identity obvious. Perhaps too obvious. Perhaps that was why they were moving everyone out. She wondered how they would handle it, subtly, with freighters, or blatantly, with Imperial star destroyers. Kellering had implied this Hammertong thing had already been loaded for transport. A look at the ship they were using should give Manda a clue as to how they were going to go about it. That would affect how their screen net would be put together.
They're through. Gates closing. They're headed your way.
Copy, Shada said, frowning. There was something in Pav's voice. Trouble?
I don't know. It all looks okay, but there's something here that feels wrong somehow.
Shada tightened her grip on her blaster rifle. Pav might be a chattercase on the comm, but she hadn't survived long enough to become Manda's team second without good combat instincts. What do you mean?
I'm not sure. They got through just a little bit too quick.
Her ears splitting from the sound of the jamming static, Shada ripped the comlink from her collar with her left hand, throwing it as far away from her as she could. So much for Kellering's naive assurances of safety. In the split of a hair, the thing had suddenly gone sour, and Manda and Pav were right in the middle of it, with Shada herself about to come in a close third. Beyond the fence, from over the next line of hills, the gleaming white figures of a dozen stormtroopers on speeder bikes had suddenly appeared, headed her way. Shada cursed again, lining up her blaster rifle with her right hand as she groped for the switch on her backup comlink with her left. If they were lucky, they'd have a minute before the Imperials found that frequency and locked it down, too. She located the switch, flicked it on.
Trap. Repeat. A trap. They've got Manda. She's down. Probably. And they're coming for me.
Pav, it's Shada, Shada cut in, squinting through the sight and squeezing off a shot. The lead stormtrooper's speeder bike exploded into a shower of sparks, pitching him to the ground and nearly doing the same to the two on either side of him. I can be there to back you up in 2 minutes.
Negative.
The tension in Pav's voice was gone, leaving a sad sort of resignation that sent a cold chill up Shada's neck.
They're already too close. I'll do what I can to keep them busy. You and Karoly had better get back to the ships and get out of here. Good luck and good...
Ahead, the speeder bikes had shifted into evasive maneuvers. Shada fired 4 rapid shots, catching another of the stormtroopers with the third of them. Karoly, she called toward her comlink. Karoly, are you there?
They're gone, Shada.
Karoly Dulin's voice was almost unrecognizable.
They're gone. The stormtroopers.
Snap out of it, Shada snarled, keying the Viper grenade launcher attached to her blaster rifle barrel. The recoil kicked the gun hard into her shoulders. The slender cylinder blasted out toward the approaching stormtroopers. Can you get to your speeder? There was a short pause, and Shada could imagine Karoly's earnest face as she pulled herself together.
Yes. Are we retreating?
Not a chance. Shada got halfway to her feet and headed at a crouch toward the bushes where her speeder bike was hidden. We're heading in. Get moving. The approaching stormtroopers, finally presented with a target, opened fire. Just as the grenade hit the ground 10 meters in front of them, exploding into a billowing cloud of green smoke.
We're going in. Shada!
I'm clear, Shada cut her off, slinging the rifle over her shoulder and kicking the speeder bike to life. Over the roar of the engine, she could hear the thuds of her erstwhile attackers falling out of the sky as the specially formulated smoke burned into the speeder bike's power connectors. Call Kai and Silene. Tell them to bring the ships in for backup.
But where are we going?
Shada swung the speeder bike around. Manda and Pav were gone, and she knew that eventually the pain of that loss would catch up with her, but for right now, she had only enough room for a single emotion. Rage. We're going to teach the Imperials a lesson, she told Karoly. Kicking the throttle to full power, she jumped the fence, curved around the edge of the green cloud, and headed in. It was a little over 10 kilometers from the outer fence to the main base area, and for the first 8 of them, Shada flew low over the rolling hills and wondered where in blazes the vaunted Imperial defenses were. Either they hadn't thrown this ambush together until Kellering's ground car pulled up at the gate, or else they'd assumed their quarry would run for it and had concentrated their forces out beyond the fence. Or else they were concentrating on Karoly. Blinking against the wind pounding against her face, trying not to think about what she might have gotten her teammate into, Shada kept going. She was 2 kilometers out when the Imperials seemed to finally wake up to the fact that they had an intruder in their midst. and those 2 kilometers more than made up for the preceding 8. 3 Maykoon hover scouts rose from nowhere to meet her, bolstered by 2 more squads of speeder bike stormtroopers. Off to the side, sections of 2 hills opened up, revealing a pair of what looked like Komar anti-atmospheric guns. The air around her was suddenly thick with blaster and laser bolts, some missing, the rest deflected by shields that hadn't really been designed with this kind of all-out attack in mind. Clenching her teeth hard enough to hurt, Shada kept going, maneuvering and returning fire on pure reflex. Off to her left, she could see another whirlwind of Imperial activity near where Karoly should be coming in. And then, suddenly, the hover scouts and speeder bikes seemed to scramble out of her path. The Komar guns shifted their aim away from her. And with a screaming roar, the Sky Claw shot past overhead, spitting a withering fire of laser blasts at the Imperials. Sileen's voice blared from the Sky Claw's belly loudspeaker. Shakai! Shada shouted back, shifting 15 degrees to her left as per Sileen's instructions, and permitting herself a flash of cold satisfaction. The Imperials might be able to jam comlinks and slice sophisticated encrypts, but she would bet starships to groundworms they wouldn't have the faintest idea what to do with Mistral battle language. To her left, she could see Kai and the Mirage now, running cover for Karoly, and she made a quick estimate of their intersect point. Just over the next row of hills, she decided. Dropping a little lower to the ground, she braced herself for whatever Sileen had sent her toward. She topped the hills, and there, nestled in a wide valley, was a complex of perhaps 20 buildings, ranging in size from flat office blocks to a single windowless structure, the size of a capital ship maintenance hangar. The Hammertong base, without a doubt. And lying in the middle of it all, dominating the scene by the sheer unexpectedness of its presence there, was the long, sleek shape of a Lorinar strike cruiser.
Some cover, Natalai.
Without waiting for her to answer, both of the fighters above her veered off to the right. A motion to her left caught Shada's eye, and she turned as Karoly's speeder bike slid into formation beside her.
You all right?
Shada called.
Yes!
Karoly shouted back. She still looked nervous, but at least she didn't look like she was going to freeze up again.
What did Sileen say? I didn't catch it. More Imperials coming. She and Kai are going to intercept. What about us?
Shada nodded toward the strike cruiser.
We're going to make the Imperials hurt a little. Bow hatchway's open. Let's try to get there before they get it sealed.
They found out immediately what 2 of the smaller buildings on the periphery of the complex were for, as sections of wall fell away and 4 more Kamar guns opened fire. But it was too little, too late. Between the harassment from the 2 fighters and the small size and maneuverability of the speeder bikes themselves, Shada and Karoly made it past the hot drive nozzles at the strike cruiser's stern and into the relative shelter of its flank, with no damage, apart from burned-out shields. Pretty rotten security they've got here, Karoly huffed, as they headed toward the bow hatchway. An instant later, she nearly had to swallow those words, as, from the ground beside the landing ramp, a dozen Imperials opened fire with blaster rifles. But the 2 speeder bikes had the edge in both firepower and targeting accuracy, and they'd covered no more than half the strike cruiser's 450-meter length before that nest of opposition had been silenced. Now what? Karoly asked, as they braked to a halt at the foot of the ramp. We do some damage. Shada half stood up on her speeder bike and took a quick look around. There was still some resistance, mostly from the Komars and the handful of speeder bike stormtroopers that hadn't yet been blown out of the sky. She and Karoly should have enough time to make their way to the strike cruiser's bridge, drop a canister or 2 of their corrosive green smoke where it would do the most good, and get the blazes out again. And then, over the distant hills ahead, a new group of Imperial forces appeared, burning through the air toward them like scorched Minox. Uh-oh, Karoly muttered. I take it back about their security. Maybe we'd better get out while we still can. Shada took a deep breath, her last views of Manda's and Pav's faces floating up from her memory. Not until we've hurt them. She swiveled around and pointed her speeder bike at the ramp. Stay here long enough to give me a 2-minute warning, then you can take off. Karoly hissed between her teeth. Get moving, she gritted out as she dropped her speeder bike into the limited protection of the ramp and unslung her blaster rifle. I'll cover you. Make it fast. Bet on it, Shada agreed tightly, trying to visualize the standard strike cruiser layout as she headed up the ramp. She would have to go forward about 10 meters along the exit corridor, then starboard to the central corridor, then forward another 20 meters to get to the bridge. Standard strike cruiser complement was something over 2,000 crewers. if there were even a fraction of that number aboard who felt like getting in her way. But she would just have to do what she could. She reached the top of the ramp, swerving to the side as she passed under the hatchway arch to avoid the exit corridor bulkhead, and lurched to an abrupt halt. Mother of...
What?
Karoly's voice came from the comlink on her collar.
Shada, what is it?
For a moment, Shada was too stunned even to speak. Stretched out in front of her, where the command rooms, crew quarters, and combat stations should have been, was a vast cavern of open space, 300 meters long and nearly 50 in diameter, running all the way from the bow to the main drive section. A heavily reinforced deck had been built across the bottom of the huge room, connected to the outer hull by an intricate spiderwebbing of support lines and bracing struts. And extending down the center of the chamber for at least 3/4 of its length was a 3-meter diameter cylinder studded with thousands of pipe connections and multicolored power and control cable linkages. Carefully wrap protected, just as carefully static fastened to the deck, all ready for travel. The Hammertong.
Shada?
Karoly called again. Shada swallowed, glancing around. The chamber seemed to be deserted, its crew or workers probably those who'd been shooting at them from the foot of the ramp. To her left, at the far forward end of the chamber, the standard strike cruiser bridge had been replaced by a simplified, freighter-style cockpit, also unmanned. And from the looks of the status displays, and the way those drive nozzles had been humming when she and Karoly had passed them, it looked like they'd been running an active status check on the flight systems when the Mistryl attack had interrupted them, which meant the ship should be pretty much ready to fly. Change of plans, she told Karoly, swiveling around and gunning the speeder bike forward toward the cockpit setup. Get in here and seal the door behind you. She was running the startup procedure at the strike cruiser's helm by the time Karoly joined her. Mother of space and time. Karoly backed up to the co-pilot seat, her eyes goggling at the room behind them. Is that the Hammertong thing Kellering was talking about? I don't know what else it could be, Shada said, mentally crossing her fingers as she eased in the repulsor lifts. A ship this size wasn't really designed to come this deep into a gravity well, but it seemed to be lifting okay. The Imperials must have added more repulsor lifts while they were gutting the interior. Get the comm adjusted to our frequency, will you? Sure. Still keeping half an eye behind them, Karoly sat down and busied herself with the comm. What's the plan? The Imperials went to a lot of work to build that thing, and modify a ship to transport it, Shada said, giving the displays a careful scan. For all their arrogance, the Imperials weren't stupid, especially when it came to hardware as impressive as the Hammertong. If their ground defenses had been low profile, they were bound to have some heavy, space-based weaponry nearby to back it up. But if it was there, it wasn't showing up on the displays. Hiding around the horizon? Or could the Mistryl counterattack have caught the whole bunch of them by surprise? Either way, there was no percentage in waiting around for them to get their seats under their rears. You got Kai and Eisley yet? She asked Karoly. Almost. Karoly's hands were busy on the board. I'm running a split freak mix. There we go.
Shada? Karoly?
Eileen's voice came over the speaker.
What in blazes are you doing?
We're giving the Empire a bloody nose, Shada said. The strike cruiser had cleared the boundary of the base now and was starting to pick up speed, leaving what was left of the speeder bike force behind them.
Shada, look, we're all upset about Manda and Pav, but this is just crazy. You're going to bring the whole Imperial fleet down on top of us.
They need to know they can't just go around killing Mistryl, not without paying dearly for it. Karoly and I can handle it ourselves if you want to leave.
No, we better stick together. Anyway, what can the Empire do to us that hasn't already been done? I'm in too.
It was Kai's voice.
One small question. Now that we've got the Hammertong, what are we going to do with it?
Shada glanced back at the long, silent cylinder behind her, the enormity of what she'd gotten them into belatedly starting to sink in. What were they going to do with the Hammertong? She and Karoly could nurse the strike cruiser along for a short flight by themselves, but that was it. Anything beyond that, fancy maneuvering, combat, even basic running maintenance was out of the question. We'll have to ditch the ship, she told the others, someplace close by. Find a way to hide it, then see if we can disassemble the Hammertong into pieces we can put aboard one of our own freighters. Sounds tricky, Karoly said. You got someplace in mind?
We've got company.
Eisley cut in before Shada could answer.
Imperial Star Destroyer coming out of hyperspace aft.
Got it, Karoly said, swiveling around to the sensor section of the board. Confirm 1 Imperial Star Destroyer, launching TIE fighters. The base probably called for help, Shada said, keying the nav computer. This was it. No second thoughts. No chance of grounding the strike cruiser and escaping aboard the fighters. They were committed now. Kai, Eisley, here comes your course feed. Code Bitterness. Make the jump to light speed as soon as you can. We'll be right behind you. There was a brief pause.
You sure this is where you want to go?
I don't see us having a lot of choices. It's close, it hasn't got much of an Imperial presence, and the locals don't ask a lot of questions. She could imagine Eisley gazing out at the strike cruiser and wondering just how far the locals' indifference was going to stretch, but all she said was,
All right. You want both of us to come with you, or should I head out and try to scare up a freighter?
That's a good idea. Go ahead. Kai and Karoly and I can handle this end.
Okay. Good luck.
The sky claw flickered with pseudo-motion and vanished into hyperspace. Here we go, Shada muttered, keying in their course and hoping fervently that the Imperials hadn't torn the hyperdrive apart as part of the ship's pre-flight check. Those TIE fighters back there were getting uncomfortably close, and there wasn't much margin for error here. Everything set there, Karoly? Looks like it. Karoly was checking over her own board. You going to let me in on the big secret of where we're going? No secret. Shada reached for the hyperdrive levers. Just a useless little hole in space called Tatooine. It was not so much a landing as it was a marginally controlled crash. And by the time the strike cruiser had skidded to a halt against one of the rippling sand dunes, it was clear to Shada that the ship would never leave there again, not without a great deal of assistance. Terrific landing. Karoly's breath came a little heavily as she shut down the drive. I presume it's occurred to you that we stick out here like a Wookiee wearing landing lights. Not for long we won't. Shada checked the displays. That cloud to the west is the leading edge of a sandstorm. Another hour and no one's going to find us. Come on, let's go take a look at our new toy. They had the wrap protection off the first couple of meters of the Hammertong by the time Kai joined them. Any trouble? Shada asked. Not really. Kai stepped up to the Hammertong and peered closely at it. I'm not sure they even picked me up, coming in. They sure didn't hail me. Usually no one bothers with ships that aren't coming into the spaceport at Mos Eisley, Shada said. A lot of contraband comes through Tatooine, and everyone pretty much looks the other way. I'm glad one of us keeps up with these things, Kai said dryly. So this is the Hammertong, huh? Any idea what it is? Not yet. How's your astromech droid doing these days? D4? Erratic, but functional. You want me to go get him? Shada nodded. We'll want to get a technical readout at the very least. Is the Mirage ready for that sandstorm? As ready as it's going to be. Kai headed back toward the hatchway. I tried to position it to keep a passage clear to both ships, and we can put the hatchway deflector shields up just to make sure. I'll be right back. The full force of the sandstorm hit about 10 minutes after Kai and the droid returned. And it took less than 10 minutes more for Shada to wonder if this whole idea might not have been a big mistake. Even through the thick hull, they could hear the drumming of the sand against the ship, a drumming that was growing louder with each passing minute. The plan had been to hide the strike cruiser from probing Imperial eyes. It would be a rather costly victory if they all wound up entombed inside it. Kai was apparently thinking along the same lines. That's all the bolts down there, she said, climbing out from under the Hammertong and handing her hydrospanner to Karoly. I'm going to go check on the storm, make sure we're not getting buried too deep. Good idea, Shada said, returning her attention to her own line of bolts. She finished them, waited as Karoly finished hers, and then together they eased the massive access panel off. The Hammertong's inner workings weren't nearly as complex as the number of pipe and power connections poking through the surface would have suggested. Most of the power and control cables seemed to run to a series of multi-helix prismatic crystals and a group of unlabeled but identical black boxes. The piping seemed mostly connected to coolant lines and sleeves. Maybe it's some new kind of power core, Shada suggested. It's a modular design. See how the pattern of connectors repeats every 5 meters down the side? We ought to be able to take it apart at those spots. Maybe. Karoly prodded thoughtfully at one of the black boxes with the end of her hydrospanner. D4, see if you can find a place to tie in. Might as well start pulling a technical readout. We're going to want everything we can get on this thing. Hey, Kai called from over at the cockpit area. Shada, Karoly, you'd better come see this. She was hunched over the main display, fiddling with the fine-tuning, when the other two reached her. What is it? Shada demanded. I'm not sure. Hard to tell through all the sand, but I think there's a battle going on up there. An Imperial Star Destroyer against something about the size of a bulk freighter. Shada leaned over the display, heart pounding. If Eisley had been unexpectedly fast at bringing in transport for them. Can you scrub the image any more? I am at the limit already. It's the sandstorm. Wait a minute, there's a break. It's a Karelian corvette. Shada let out a quiet sigh. Not one of the Mistryl ships, then. I wonder what's going on. I don't know. Wait a minute. 2 more Star Destroyers coming in from hyperspace. That's a lot of firepower for a planet like Tatooine, Karoly said. They only had 1 Star Destroyer guarding the Hammertong. Unless 1 or more of these were supposed to have been there, too, Shada suggested. Could be they got pulled away to help chase that Karelian. Either way, the Karelian must be pretty important to them, Kai said. We could be in the middle of something really big here. Shada looked back at the Hammertong and the diminutive droid working alongside it. Kai was right, and suddenly she was feeling very short on time. Kai, do you think we could get one of those modules off the Hammertong? We could try. Probably take a couple of days, with just the 3 of us in D4. Why? I don't think we're going to be able to wait for Eisley to bring back a ship. If she hasn't made it in by the time we get one of those modules off, we'd better take what we've got and get out of here. You'll never get one of those modules into the Mirage, Karoly objected. It's way too big. I know, Shada said. That's why, if it comes to that, you and I will go to Mos Eisley and hire ourselves a freighter. Come on, let's get started. Over there, Shada said, pointing toward a dilapidated building across the sandy Mos Eisley street and double-checking her data pad. That's the Cantina. Doesn't look like much. Karoly swung the Mirage's antique speeder over toward it. You really think we're going to find a good pilot in there? Someone in the Mistryl thought so, Shada shrugged. It was the top name on the contingency list for Tatooine. I doubt that's a really telling recommendation. Karoly let the speeder coast to a stop. I don't like this, Shada. I really don't. Brea, not Shada. And you're Senny. Don't forget that insider. This whole thing could fall apart. It's got a good chance of doing that all by itself. Look, just because a couple of stormtroopers on traffic duty bought this charade. Karoly gestured sharply at the slinky jumpsuit and hived hairdo wig she was wearing. Doesn't mean anyone who actually knows the Tonnika sisters is going to fall for it. They're not. Well, we certainly can't use our own names and IDs, Shada pointed out, trying to hide her own nervousness about this masquerade. This place is crawling with stormtroopers already, and if they haven't got listings on us yet, they will soon. The Mistryl have been running this camouflage pre-match system for a long time now, and I've never yet heard of it failing. If it says the 2 of us can pass as Brea and Senny Tonnika, then we can. Looking like them and acting like them are 2 very different things. Besides which, pretending to be a couple of criminals is not my idea of keeping low. She had a point, Shada had to admit. Brea and Senny Tonnika were professional con artists. Good ones, too. who were said to have separated an impressive amount of wealth from an equally impressive list of the galaxy's rich and powerful. Under normal circumstances, borrowing their identities would indeed not be a smart way to stay inconspicuous. But the circumstances here were far from normal. "We don't have any choice," she said. "Complete strangers automatically draw attention, and a place like Mos Eisley is always crawling with informants, especially now. Our only chance of keeping the Imperials off us is to look like we belong here. To everyone." She looked out at the cantina. Karoly was right. The place didn't look very inviting. "If you'd rather, you can stay out here and watch the door. I can find a pilot by myself." Karoly sighed. "We're going to have to talk someday about these sudden surges of recklessness. Come on, we're wasting time."